I wonder, James, well, having mentioned the name Abel, Hevel, and kind of the fact that there seems to be some significance for understanding the text as a whole, just from looking at the meaning of the names. We've spoken about the Book of Ruth and the names there, which seem odd, but seems to be another case of names, the meaning of the names influencing how we understand the text. Yeah, you've mentioned this to me before, and I thought it was brilliant, so I just wonder whether you could...
Yeah, I mean, Ruth is interesting because when you read commentaries on it, they will often refer to Ruth's names as artificial, as if they've been chosen for the sake of the narrative, because they do seem to fit the narrative. You know, Machlon sounds a little bit like illness, and Kilion sounds a little bit like someone who's wasting away. Right. And since those two people die, that seems to fit. Yeah. Ruth sounds a bit like Reut, and she's a good friend. You know, Orpah sounds a bit like Oref, doesn't it? As in the Israelites, Sheoref, you know, stiff-necked, and she turns her neck, can be back as well, back of the neck, turns her back on Naomi, you know, and so they seem to fit their narrative in that sense. But my guess is that they've got much more prosaic historical explanations in terms of what their bearers were thinking of. So we've thought about weather names before, haven't we? About a child in sort of Jordan today, if they're born in the snow, might be called Thalgi or something like that. Hebrew sheleg, the word for snow. And that theme of weather names extends to people who are born in bad weather. So a time of drought or famine, people often get names to do with drought and famine. And my guess is that Machlon and Kilion are both to do with drought and to do with conditions to do with dryness, because they were born in a drought. You know? And so if you think of the verb that underlies Kilion, like kalar, it can be to waste away and to be consumed. But normally what's doing the consuming, if you just read through the biblical text, is a famine. There is this ra'av, which is consuming the land. And Machel is a very good name, sort of still used in Jordan today, which is to do with dryness and a place where there's no pasture. And it's reflected in the Bible, actually. If you think of Avel Mecholah, this sort of territory out in a dry part of Gilead, that was probably where there wasn't much pasture. And it's actually next to we say it Lo-Dibar, don't we? Lo-Dvar, no pasture. Think of sort of like Midbar and words like this can be to do with finding pasture. And my guess is that those names reflect these two children born in famine, born in a time of drought, because Bethlehem was afflicted with famine. Orpah and Ruth, on the other hand, I suspect come from conditions to do with rainfall. Orpah, you can think of what is Moses talks about his teaching being like the dew and things which fall. I can't remember exactly what he says. Or something like that. Let my teaching descend, like the dew. And it's a word for a cloud as well. And Ruth, it's kind of to do with abundance, you know, overflowing. And, you know, they head out to this different part of the world, to Moab, where things are, different climate, you know, up in the hills, more rainfall, etc. And so my guess is that those names have those historical explanations, and that the author of Ruth records them in order to draw attention, because there's no need to record a name, is there? We've got plenty of nameless figures. Think of the guy in Ruth who's just Poloni Almoni, just some passerby, some fellow, you know. His name isn't recorded, interestingly, because he sort of passes by the opportunity to have his name recorded. You know, would have been had he done the right thing and redeemed Ruth, you know. And so I'm fine with what the commentaries say, that these are meant to make us think about illness and so forth. But I think they've got good historical explanations at the same time.
Yes, that's very good.
And that's just lovely with what that means for how we read the book of Ruth, that we have these Israelites as Mahlon and Chilion, kind of famine and sort of desolation or something. And they're the Israelites, and they're supposed to be the people of life, and they're in Bethlehem, the house of bread, where there is no bread.
Right.
And they go off to Moab, and that's the place where they find Ruth, abundance.
Yeah.
And, you know, that root word behind Ruth is like in Psalm 23, my cup overflows, is my cup Ruth's. And so it's kind of a commentary on the state spiritually of Israel there, that they're not necessarily following the Lord, and they go to Moab and find Ruth who loves the Lord. And it's stunning.
Yeah.